But how will the rest of us remember the Diamond Jubilee?
Wet, probably. Well, joining us are the royal
Cold.
biographer Kate Williams and Helen Lewis, Deputy Editor of The New Statesman. Thank you both for being here. A 4-day celebration, 1.5 million people on the Mall yesterday, Kate. Was it a boost to Britain?
Well, there's been much conversation about actually how it might have been an economic loss to Britain. I think there was great excitement. Obviously, we all had a great time, particularly the street parties. There were street parties all over the country. But there also were moments which perhaps weren't so good. You know, we did all freeze on Sunday. And, you know, I do think also historians of the future, I think, are going to look back and say, you know, gosh, you know, we all downed tools for 4 days to celebrate the monarchy. I don't think that necessarily will be done again.
But it probably won't happen again for a very long time, will it?
60 years, you never know. And
yeah.
We may have a platinum in 10 years' time.
Is it not right to celebrate someone's achievement of 60 years on the throne, Helen, in such a way?
I have absolutely nothing against people having a party and having a celebration, and I think we can all agree that the Queen has done a very difficult job and done it very well for 60 years. The question is why you devote so much time to one person's achievement. I mean, you know, looking at the river pageant, there were people in there who were on the Dunkirk little ships, and what they've done is in every way as admirable as the Queen.
But in a sense, weren't they getting in on the celebration? I mean, you know, what struck me was, obviously the Queen is the figurehead, obviously she was being constantly praised, but really it was a patriotic festival, wasn't it, rather than specifically a monarchist one.
Well, one of our writers called it a celebration of people who want to celebrate the Queen, and that's how I began to feel. It was being used as if you're not totally on board with this, then in some way you hate Britain. And I thought that was a very odd idea to take. I think there was lots of different ways of celebrating Britain, lots of brilliant things about Britain, and this was a very narrow thing that I think it was, you know, I think we all...
I mean, you know, it seemed to me that there were... You know, you couldn't say this was a narrow section of society who took part in these celebrations.
Well, there was one great clip where they said, well, this is an incredibly democratic celebration, and at that point I thought, well, you know, come on.
I think the thing is, it would be great if we had a celebration every year of Britain, and great if we had a celebration of all our achievements and everything that we do and what's good and bad about Britain. But we do tend to focus Britain on the monarchy. I mean, we throughout history we see the changing ages, and we put them together with the king. So it's Elizabethan age, and in the future this probably will be the second Elizabethan age. And I think in particular, what I was slightly surprised about with the Jubilee, I thought it was a marvellous celebration. It all went off very well. What I was slightly surprised about was there wasn't actually any. You know, you had to pay to participate. It was, as Helen has, if you wanted to celebrate, you could, but it was up to you to pay. And I think of Queen Victoria's in 1897, 40,000 of the poorest people were treated to a big lunch at the state's expense, and we didn't really have that again today. If you could come and see the pageant, and it was all free, but you had to be paid. You had to pay for yourself.
It has to be said, Sir John Major, we're not saying this. There is the Diamond Jubilee appeal, which is going to be. I mean, the Queen said she didn't want any presents or statues or anything. All the money goes into this fund, which is not just for this country, but is going to be, I think, for third world projects like in blindness as well. I mean, in a sense, the reason why you have to pay for it was because, you know, it would have been controversial had it been done on the taxpayer to a large extent.
Well, and I think that there are some figures out that we are footing some of the bill for it.
Security, of course, we'll have to foot.
But, I mean, I find it more the fact that...
You have to do that for party conferences.
That dissenting viewpoints were squeezed out. I mean, for me, the apogee came when I saw a piece in, I think it was the Mail, which said, you know, the archbishops hijacked this occasion to make a speech about greed and things like that. And you thought, well, it's come to the stage now where we're not even allowed to have church leaders making moral, you know, proclamations. It's what they're for, fundamentally, if you believe in the Church of England. But no, if you say anything apart from God bless the Queen, that, you know, that was totally excluded for 4 days. That's all we wanted to hear. That's all we were given.
There was this protest on Sunday by Republic, the anti-monarchy campaign group, near City Hall, but it wasn't particularly well supported, was it?
No, and I mean, I wasn't down there, although I do call myself a Republican, because I take the point that, you know, if people want to celebrate, then that's good, and that's, you know, but I don't think fun should be enforced. Enforced fun is not fun.
And I think the problem also with Republic's organisation as well is a lot of people, you know, that single-issue politics is beginning to decline. People are more concerned about the economy, the stories that we're once more covering once more again, the Euro crisis, the general crisis. That's what they're more concerned about.
I mean, that's the issue, isn't it, about republicanism? Just on your list of priorities, how high does it come?
Oh, absolutely, and I think, but you know,
and in that sense, that's been, you know, some pretty clever footwork by the royal family in the sense that they're not seen as an issue.
Well, that's been one of the problems with the news coverage, hasn't it? Is that there is very little to say about the royal family apart from we like the royal family. They are now in a state where they don't put a foot wrong, and that means that we're all constantly looking for other stories to tell, and that's why you've got so much criticism of the TV coverage, for example, because fundamentally you've got 4 days of planned events. There's not a great deal to say about them, and everyone has to scratch around.
And it's very difficult. I mean, of course, the Queen. I was talking to an American channel. And they said, "Will the Queen ever do an interview?" I was like, "No, the Queen doesn't do interviews." And we don't know what. And we hardly have ever heard Kate Middleton speak. Very frequently heard Harry and William speak. So we'll never have an. Actually, all we can say is what they might feel. We don't know. So really, we do have to comment on how the events were presented. And
how
it wasn't
they were perceived. I mean, you mentioned Americans there. There was the Jon Stewart piece that he did mocking the coverage of the Jubilee.
Like to North Korea, I think.
Yeah, and talking about, just all looking at a whole load of boats.
Well, what struck me about that is that no British comedian was given any airtime to do that. I didn't see a kind of a whisper of even a little bit of cheekiness about our coverage.
There were plenty of British comedians on the stage at the concert, though, weren't there?
But did any of them say anything that would have startled the horses? I don't think they did.
I'll tell you, I've never seen an American comedian joking about the 4th of July or the flag.
The Americans, I was with the channels, and there were huge amounts of coverage from the American media, and they covered the royal wedding in even greater detail last year. I mean, the fairy tale, the Great Royal Wedding, all the foreign media were covering it, and I think, it's quite, it's a kind of, I think it exemplifies Britain, the good things and the bad things. The good things, we have this great history. For some people, we're too tied to it.
OK, so what does it tell us about our country? I mean, Matthew Dancona's had a go in the Evening Standard. He's written a piece and said what it basically tells us is we're contradictory. We like being stiff upper lip, but we also like moaning about the weather, as it were.
It was freezing, though.
Yeah.
You didn't look cold, Adam, but you must have been a bit.
No, but what I mean is, what do you think it tells us about Britain? I mean, for a progressive, is it a disappointing picture, if you like?
And it is a little bit when you talk about the American, because there's this almost sense like we're a museum to them. They kind of look at us with our quaint hats and our quaint phone boxes, and they kind of go, look at them stuck in the past. But I think fundamentally what it tells us is most people quite like having 4 days off work.
And I think really the greatness of the British monarchy is if you believe in constitutional monarchy, and the great success of the Queen is that we simply don't know what she thinks about political issues. It is, we can guess, I'm sure we can all guess what she thinks about the hunting ban and the changes to the House of Lords. We don't know because she doesn't intervene, and that, I think, is why she has been so successful. And what is going to be different about Charles, that if he can, the mantle, if he can maintain that mantle of political neutrality, the monarchy will continue. But that's, I think, a lot of countries, they've obviously got rid of their kings and queens, and I think the reason why we have ours still is partly because we have our revolution in the 17th century, but also because they usually manage to maintain an attitude of political neutrality, and so it does seem like one party weekend, or we can all have parties. And I thought the street parties were so joyous. I was in Battersea Park. I thought that was marvellous. The children were really enjoying it, the young people having fun, and then it's a shame really we need an excuse to have a street party, an excuse to get together with our neighbours. But this is modern Britain, increasingly isolated.
And I have to say that some people in the crowd, to me and to others, were saying, well, what this shows is, we may be crap at football, we'll know in a couple of weeks' time. Probably know now, but we're very good at pageantry. It is a national export.
And it is very nice to have something to be proud of, but it is, we're fundamentally very good at something that was quite relevant in the 16th century. Perhaps we should celebrate the things we're good at now.
Thank you both very much indeed.